Oh, yes. One more left.
What are you doing?
Eating an Oreo.
No, I was going to use those for Look Up Aurora this week.
Did you bring enough for everybody?
No, I was going to show them the phases of the moon with the Oreos.
You still can. It's a new moon.
Hey guys, welcome to Look Up Aurora. This week we are talking about the full moon. So that's a really fun activity that you guys can do from home, is you can go to the store and you have an amazing excuse now to buy a pack of Oreos or your favorite sandwich cookie, and you can take the cream on the cookie and slowly kind of take the cream away just a little bit by little bit, and that way you can actually see the phases of the moon on the cookie.
As long as nobody eats them first.
Yes, as long as nobody eats them first.
You can eat them afterwards, too.
You should absolutely eat them afterwards.
They grow great in some milk.
Yes.
So we'll start off with our Halloween night sky. It's going to have a full moon, which is what we're going to talk about a lot. But also, if you look straight up, you'll see my favorite constellation, Orion, which we have named our spacecraft that is going to the moon and Mars after.
So there are lots of names for the full moon that you get in the fall. The one that we're all most familiar with is usually the harvest moon. You can see all of the different names here on the screen. I won't talk about all of them. I would definitely recommend look some of these up. They're really, really interesting. One of the ones that I found was really cool was the Moon Cake Festival that they have in China. They actually make a dessert called moon cake, and it's like a delicacy that you can get from the bakeries there. It sounded really, really good, so I might have to try that someday.
I want to try some moon cake.
Moon cake sounds good.
Can you make some moon pies?
Yeah, well, you can always try moon pie. It's not the same thing, though. I looked it up. Not the same thing. So the harvest moon is what we typically call the moon closest to the autumn equinox here in the United States. And that usually happens at the end of summer or the start of fall. Now, it's usually in September and not October, so it's kind of interesting this year we're having it in October. And during the harvest season, it happened because the farmers were need to work late into the night, and being able to see by the full moon helped them to get the harvest out. So that's why they call it the harvest moon. And that term actually dates all the way back to the 18th century, which is really cool.
So a blue moon is, it happens if you get two full moons in a month.
It happens, what, once in a blue moon?
Which is really not that rare, but we say it all the time. But full moons are separated by 29 days, so you can imagine it happens. It happens quite often. But it's also the third full moon in a single season, so it would be the third full moon of spring. And a blue moon is not always blue, or I don't really think it has anything to do with the color. It's just happens to be where we put our calendar.
Yep.
So our moon phases, the simple, easy ones are the full moon and the new moon, or we call it the were moon. You can't see the moon. So you have the full moon and the new moon, and between them you have the first quarter and the third quarter. So here's an animation of our moon phases, and you can see as the shadow sweeps across the moon, you can see all of our moon phases that we're typically used to seeing, but if you also notice, the moon appears to wobble back and forth a little bit. And the moon isn't actually wobbling, but the moon doesn't orbit on the same plane that the Earth and the Sun do. It's just slightly off kilter, which is why we don't get a solar and lunar eclipse every single month. Besides, just our quarter moons, there's more in between stages. So you have our full moon, and then it's the waxing gibbous moon, first quarter, the waxing crescent, and then the new, and then the waning crescent, and then the third quarter, and then our waning gibbous moon. And the best moons to go see stars are new and waxing and waning crescent, because they're not too bright. They don't make all the stars go away. Or you can just go out when the moon hasn't risen yet.
Now, when is the best time to actually go out and gaze up at the moon? Because you would think it would be the night of the full moon, but it's not.
It's not. It's really great for full moons when you're sitting there and you're just looking out at your backyard and you don't have anything else with you. But if you bring binoculars or a telescope, you're not going to hurt your eyes, but it does start to kind of wear on you looking at a full moon through the telescope. There is so much light. You can get filters to help knock it down. The best ways to look at the moon through amplification telescope binoculars is the crescent moons, because you can see you can see a lot of detail where the light meets the shadow. You can see like edges of craters. Before we ever go out and do a live viewing, which we're hoping to do hopefully in the spring when it warms back up a little bit, we always start with time and date, and you can see the moon rises and sets and the phases of the moon.
The dark side of the moon.
So October 1959, Luna 3 was launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, so Russia. It was the first to send back pictures of the far side of the moon. I claim that they just left their lens cap on and they didn't want to tell anybody. 50 years later, the LRO, or the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, launched, and it also imaged the dark side of the moon. So here's an animation of the dark side of the moon as it crosses the Earth. And it's amazing what you can still see. It's dark, but you can still see a lot of detail there.
There's a lot of kind of mythology and pop culture references around the full moon and things that people say about the full moon. You know, teachers always kind of lament, oh no, a full moon is coming, the kids are going to be crazy. And there's actually kind of some truth to that. So the words lunacy and lunatic actually come from the Latin word luna for the moon, which is also where you get the Harry Potter character Luna Lovegood. So and our dog is actually named Luna Lovegood after that Harry Potter character.
And she barks at Nurgles.
She does, true fact. So there was an article by the Wall Street Journal where they talked to doctors and nurses and other people who work in hospitals, and they actually used the phrase harbingers of chaos to describe the full moon. They said this is like even worse, especially around Halloween. So stay safe during the full moon on Halloween, guys.
It's 2020. Everybody be careful out there.
Yes. So the other big thing with pop culture and the full moon is, of course,
werewolves.
Werewolves.
They're wolf.
They're wolf. So werewolves date all the way back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome in writing, which is really kind of cool. And the idea of the werewolf was actually taken as both kind of positive and negative, depending on which culture was talking about it. In Norse history, werewolves were actually seen as being kind of a blessing if you were blessed by the wolf, because it gave you kind of like more strength and power as a fighter, which is really interesting, I think. Mythology behind the werewolf myth has changed so much over time. Sometimes you could become a werewolf by just wearing a wolf pelt. Sometimes you just had to walk out under the full moon. And now it's you have to be bitten by a werewolf, and sometimes it's under the full moon, and sometimes it's any time, and it just kind of really varies from one culture to another, from one myth to another. And of course, speaking of werewolves, the book that we're going to recommend this time is actually a fiction series based on werewolves. So I'm going to recommend the Gail Carriger series, which is one of my personal favorites. I adore Gail Carriger. And so she writes a lot of different series that kind of deal with werewolves. She has a young adult series called the Finishing School series, which is amazing. All of these books are steampunk, and they have werewolves and they have vampires, and they have kind of all of these really cool different elements in them. And they're really, really interesting, and they have a lot of really amazing, strong female characters, which I truly enjoy. The adult series start with the book Soulless, and she has 2 adult series, which, like I said, are amazing and great, and you should read them today. Pick them up from your local Aurora library.
And once again, all this information that we've gotten has been either from the internet or these awesome stargazing apps. There's Sky Map, Skyview, Constellation Map. All of these are really, really great. They all work really, really well. So download one and keep looking up.
All right, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And don't forget to try the really fun Oreo activity we mentioned at the beginning. Unless someone steals your Oreos.
They tasted great to me. Whatever phase of the moon they were delicious.
And remember to try to stay safe under the full moon on Halloween. You guys keep looking up, Aurora. Oh!